Yeah, we're live 6:58. I'm ahead of schedule. Hope everybody's doing well. Today we're going to talk about, or tonight, I'm going to talk about a couple things. One, the video that I just posted. If you have not checked it out, you need to go see it right away. Hopefully not while you're trying to watch this. Although you could do a picture in a picture, do a dual screen, which would be awesome. Go look at the video that I put up. It's on all about tune port stuff. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, because we're talking about runner length, which is something that really gets me excited. I do like doing runner length tests because a lot of people don't understand it. They seem to think that intake manifolds, you just got to get lots of tunnel flow. You're just going to needs to flow. You got to port match it and get it to flow. No, that's not what does it. But you improve the plenum volume. No, that's not what does it. There are a lot of things, and there are a lot of things to adjust, and I like changing all of them. But as we saw from this video, if you guys haven't taken a look, go take a look. But you'll see what happens when we change the runner length. It has a dramatic effect. In fact, we go from a long runner one that flows probably less than the short runner one does. The short runner one flows more, and yet it makes less power through most of the curve. That has nothing to do with flow, and it has everything to do with these reflected waves, the supercharging effect that happens with runner length. And this is a really cool test for a number of reasons. One, it shows we have dramatic changes in runner length. So we have a dramatic effect on the power curve. And I ran very, very short runner stuff, which is the TPIS mini RAM, or would be similar to the later LT1 kind of style intake manifold, very short runner, common plenum kind of deal. And when Chevrolet went to that, it was a big change for them compared to the previous TunePort L98. Again, my favorite intake manifold design that they made. Even though it's not the most effective, it still looks the best. It still looks super cool. So when you pop a hood and you see that, especially a polished, shiny one, I think it looks awesome. I also like it even more with the Callaway twin turbo dual intercooler deal. Although, again, not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but it looks super cool. But we were able to show the super long runner TunePort version in modified form. This one had an extrude honed lower intake manifold. It had the big tubes from TPIS. We had a slightly modified factory plenum that made it up with the bigger tubes and also the bigger throttle body that we use. That worked very well. In fact, in the video, I showed you how much better it worked than just the stock TunePort stuff. And basically, the cool thing, because there's so much coolness with this test, the cool thing is that it made more power because it flowed more. But because it had identical runner length, the shape of the curve was exactly the same. Basically, what we had were kind of railroad tracks with the thing being just better everywhere. That's a very cool thing. And then we also ran a very, very short runner one, which not surprisingly made a lot more peak power than the long runner TunePorts. That's not unusual at all. We see that all the time. If you were to put a single plane on, which we also ran, we ran it in fuel injected form, or a dual plane, we ran it in carbureted form. We did all kinds of tests. So we ran that. So on the two ends of the spectrum, we had the very, very long TunePort stuff and the very, very short TPIS mini RAM. But I also had everything in between. I only included one other one, actually two. I snuck one in there right at the end. I snuck in the Holley Stealth RAM, which is also a good intake, basically a tunnel RAM with a box on it and a front mount for the throttle body. I just threw that in there at the end. So if you stayed all the way to the end, you got to see that. You got to see the little Holley Stealth RAM Easter egg, as it were. And it did exactly what we expected it to. And so did the going from the long runner extreme to the short runner extreme. I put one in the middle extreme, which was the Excel Super RAM, because the Excel Super RAM has a cool giant size plenum, big throttle body, but it also has runner length that is basically not as short as the mini RAM, but also not as long as the regular modified TunePort that we ran. So if we have runner length that's between the really long one and the really short one, what's going to happen? It's going to do exactly what we showed in the video. It's going to be in between the other two in terms of their power curve. So it did exactly that. It made less torque than the long runner one and less horsepower than the short runner one. It kind of was like fed right in the middle of those curves. And then when I snuck in the Holley Stealth RAM, it slotted in right in between those as well. So everything worked out the way that it should and the way that you know, science tells us it's going to. The laws of thermodynamics and the laws of physics all kind of work together, and they say, hey, look, it should do this, and then it does that, and it all works out. The other cool thing about this, and the fact that we got to test all these intake manifolds, and they did the things that they're supposed to do. The other interesting thing that's kind of a side note to this test is that this test was not run on the motor that it should have been run on. It was run on a 383, which I like because it tends to tax the airflow requirements of these intake manifolds. Everybody says that the factory tune port was designed for a 305 and that they ran it on a 350. Now, I've never seen confirmation of that from any GM engineer or design team that said, hey, look, when we first did this, we only had 305 in mind, or that I've also been told that the 350 has different runners than the 305. You know, all these things, all of these like internet myths that happen. I've never confirmed that. It makes sense that they were thinking 305 and that they also ran it in a 350. It worked very well. But my point is, running it on the 383 would really tax the flow rate, especially of a stock one, but even the modified ones. We ported the heck out of them and got them to flow a lot better, but still the runner length was not designed for that displacement motor. And it also was not designed for that displacement motor modified in the way that we had it modified. This motor was basically a carbureted motor that was sitting around that was available for testing. So it was a 383. It had aluminum trick flow heads. It also had a pretty big camshaft in it, way more camshaft than I would use on any tune port application. So what that tended to do was this combination actually tended to favor the short runner high RPM combinations, because that's what camshaft it had in it. It had a camshaft and it had enough head flow to want to make power at a higher engine speed. And so when we gave it the kind of intake that it wanted, it naturally did that. What we would have seen had I done this test on a 350 with a more reasonable kind of camshaft, even something that was, let's say on the big side, let's say it was a 224, 230, or even a 230, 236 kind of thing in a 350, what we would have seen is on the smaller motor with a milder camshaft, we would have seen that combination favoring the long runner stuff even more. So what we would have shown was that the crossover point between the long runner and the short runner would have been extended out in RPM range on the smaller, milder motor. It would have liked the longer runner even more than the 383 did. But even with the 383, even with the wrong cam, it definitely had the wrong cam, and the wrong displacement, it didn't really have the wrong displacement, because a 383 that's making 533 foot-pounds of torque is really nothing but good, even though it had the wrong camshaft in it. But on a 350, I think it would have even been more applicable, because more people would have been using that combination than would have been trying it on a silly 383. But despite that fact, it worked very well. It demonstrated exactly what runner length does. And I think that makes it an even better test, because even on the wrong combination, runner length still does what runner length does. It didn't have to be optimized with the perfect camshaft and the perfect displacement and something that's more usual that people would have been running at the time. So I think that's why I like this test, and I refer back to it all the time. In fact, the poll for tonight is, if you guys, hopefully you guys have seen, and if you have not, I want you to click off and then come back on. Go look at the thumbnail. I want you to see the thumbnail. The thumbnail is a bunch of different intake manifolds that we had, that we posed this picture. And this is my buddy Tom that used to work at West Tech that I did a bunch of land speed stuff with. Shout out to Tom. He's out there in Texas. But one of the and I never did, but one of the engine that I used for the photo was one that West Tech had at the time, and it had stack injection on it. Now, we never tested the stack injection because it wasn't on that motor. That wasn't part of the test. I was only testing the tune port stuff. So the poll for tonight is, I can't remember now because it's been multiple decades since I did this test, but I don't remember if that stack injection was mechanical injection or if it was EFI. Either way, it's still like super cool, because whenever you see stack injection on anything, it just looks awesome. But the question for tonight is, injection intake test. Okay, so the Pulford side is, if you guys take a look at that, and the guys that are just coming here and watching this and being caught up, if you've seen the thumbnail, and guys that come in after we do the live feed, if you've seen the thumbnail, should I have tested the stack injection on the tune port injection test? Let's see what people think. That's one of the comments that I got, because the tune port test itself, where we tested all these intakes, I think that there's 8 or 10 of them, or 12, or how many ever we tested, because I ran carbureted ones also, and we ran single planes and stuff, but I ran a few of them. But in that test, that's one of the comments that I got more often than not. Hey, where's the stack injection? How come you didn't test it? I watched the video just so that I could see that. So let's see what people have to say. I should have tested the stack injection. I really wanted to, because I like stack injection, and also it would have been cool to see what that runner length does compared to the other runner lengths, and what that straight runner length does compared to. And also, I think that if we look back, that was like a Crowder injection or something. I think that the tube diameter also would have been different. So we would have had even more information. So it would have been kind of cool. So let's see what you guys got going on. And as always, if we're going to talk about tune port, everybody's going to talk about the fact that they should have been put in trucks. So let's just get that over with right now. It definitely should have been put in trucks. And anybody out there that has a small block Chevy that's looking for towing and low speed power and stuff, make your motor bigger. If you have a small block, make it a 383, and then put tune port injection on it, and it will work really well. Alan, what's up? Let's see. I've tested some tunnel rounds with my flow bench and had the flow actually improve with the intake on at certain valve lifts. Richard, do you think it'd be advisable to cut a section out of the runners on my intake and glue them back together with JB Weld to maybe put them back together with a plate or an O-ring system? Why are you cutting it and then putting it back together? Are you taking a section out or something? You could also just put them back together with rubber or silicone connectors and hose clamps. We've done that a lot. I don't know if you're testing it or running it all the time. If you had to guess, how far away is the injector from the intake valve on a Gen 2 LT1? It's probably similar to an LS, right? Is the port length on the two heads different? Maybe it would be, right? I need to know for an injector end angle table calculator. What is that? Are you working on what is it? What is it that the tuners always tell me makes 1,000,000 horsepower? Injector timing. What about the science behind sheet metal custom intake manifolds? Well, the fact that they're sheet metal doesn't do anything, but the design of the intake would be something. We've run a lot of sheet metal manifolds or sheet aluminum intake manifolds, like these Sniper ones that are that are not all they're cracked up to be. I welded and ported and increased the cross-sectional area 1.5 square inches on my tunnel ram and picked up 35 CFM. On the Ford 5.4 liter Cobra R and Ford GT heads, the manifold was good for 25 CFM. Did you not have a radius entry on the head when you tested that? Check out my YouTube with the Iron Duke Chevy 151, 2 IDF 44 carbs. So do you have side drafts on it then? Scott, you know I can't answer your question now, right? Did you talk about 93 to 95 LT1 intake manifold? Did it have one of the shortest runners ever for a small block Chevy? I think that probably is the shortest factory one that I've seen. Short of maybe some of the blower manifold ones were shorter than that, but I'd have to look and see. You'd have to really get down and kind of measure and see what's going on. Some of the maybe like an LT, like the LT4 or LT5 stuff, maybe with the superchargers on them, maybe those were shorter, because a lot of times to package the intercooler in there, they just kind of have very short runners going to an open plenum. But I don't know enough about the what is the LSA, maybe that one. Injector timing can make it idle better. We didn't really see much power with injector timing, but every cool guy tuner that I talked to, oh, you guys don't know how to tune. You got to do injector timing. And somebody told me that, oh, you got to put this injector in, it'll gain 15% power across the board. I'm like, how far off would I have had to have in my other injector choice for you to pick up 15% of power across the board? That would be a lot. Is that injector spraying nitromethane or at least E85? Let's see. I shorted the runners on my 98 Cobra at Phil Hunt Space. Yeah, I've been down that road before. Then I deleted the MRIC and it got even worse. Yes. I have videos up, I think, on the early Cobra stuff. And when we were playing with the intake manifolds, what everybody was doing was cutting big sections of those runners out. And that's not a good idea. And the MRIC plates work too. If you are going for maximum flow at wide open throttle, getting rid of that might be a way to go, but it's there for a reason and it works fairly well for, that's why I always show all of the curve, or not all of the curve, not at 800 RPM and not at 12,000 RPM, but most of the curve so that you can see what it does everywhere else, because it's very important. Got a question on my Dominator controlled 5.3 Turbo Nova. Swapped a tune, only had fuel changes, and it surged really bad. Oh, original tune showed rich in the lean table. That's why your fueling change. Well, but you also have to listen to what the motor's doing. We do this, and particularly at idle, and an awful lot on carbureted applications, but also on fuel injected applications. Oh, I want this thing needs to run it needs to idle at 14.7. No, it doesn't. Where it needs to idle at in terms of air fuel is take a look at the vacuum and listen to the motor. Where is it happy? That's where we put it. I don't care about what that number is. Scott, do you think do you think that the M122 needs ring gap? Yes, it does. It needs ring gap, and especially that because the charge temperature is going to be higher coming from that M122 anyways, much more so than a turbo would be. The engine, oh, the engine is laid over 45 degrees like a midget car with a homemade intake. I get you. Ford 557 stroker. Is there a decent performing low height intake manifold available? Need to fit under the hood of 79 Lincoln. I don't know about the hood height requirement. Can you mill a? Is this going to be a single plane intake? 557? Is it like a 7,500 RPM or 7,000 RPM 557, or is it a 5,500 RPM 557? You're gonna build some custom turbo headers. Vigo turbo, super glue and baking soda. Pulling the motor will make a cam install easier. Yeah, that's true. And Scott, I honestly think that you could get away with some kind of boost and drive it around. We don't know what the ring gap is there. You might drive it around at 7 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever, and drive around and have good gas in it, have a good tune in it, and it may never hurt itself. It may go break the first time that you lay into the gas. Probably is not going to do that. We've run lots of motors without ring gap in them. It's just a good idea, and I would do it if it's a long-term thing. If it's going to be in the car for a long time, it's better to have peace of mind and have the ring gap in it. Ford 557, 6,500 RPM, 10 to 1, target, scat steel crank, aluminum, hydraulic roller. That's still going to be kind of, because I don't know that does somebody make a really good dual plane intake manifold that has big ports that will flow up there? That still sounds like a single plane deal to me on a 557. So a low rise single plane. Do they make maybe somebody still makes a torquer or something like that, but it's just not going to be that good. I used an Elbrock manifold on 429. I put it on a 79 Thunderbird. The wind was too tall. The factory one's fairly low profile, and it did well. It's just it did well really down low, and it did well on a stockish kind of motor. Right? On a 557, it's going to need an aftermarket intake. Got my other guy's motorhome 440 on the dyno. Nice. 460 wheel horsepower, 517 foot-pounds through a 13 to 1 solid roller, E85 TFS 240. Nice. Racer D, I highly recommend a video called NASCAR Engines 101. Explains just how inefficient an internal combustion engine really is. It is. Most of the stuff is just going away. He says 35.4% at 858 horsepower on a 358 cubic inch motor, which is a pretty good one. Mexico City. Larry, the old one, straight up built some prototype parts from baking soda and super glue. Was Larry the guy from Endine? I want to try and make 450 all motor with this Mark 8. What size is it, Admiral? Just joined. Saw the title on your 8-stack. See, 8-stack injection. Sure, stacks get you top end and mile an hour. Taller stacks get more low end and better 60 foot. Somebody should do a video about that. Dan, 464 valve, 24-pound injectors. 24-pound injectors are going to limit how much power you can make. The Army repairs helicopter blades with super glue and baking soda. And also helicopter tape, right? That's the really cool clear tape. It's a 93 model Lincoln Mark 8 with a B head 4.6 and the rear inlet early intake. So you want to make 100 horsepower per liter with that. That's certainly possible with what those heads flow. No one has yet tried long runners with large cross sections. Yes, they have. Crowder stack injection on big block Chevys has exactly that. The large cross-section of a long runner would rescue the top end from being choked off. It's not going to change the reflected wave, but it will help a little bit on the top. It's not going to save it. Found some really nasty repairs under the dash of my C5. White, foamy looking stuff. Couldn't figure out what it was. I think you guys just glued me in. Is it the super glue and baking soda? I'll be happy with that, and then run 15 pounds boost. I think we did 485 or something on a, but it wasn't a B-headed motor. But John swears the B-headed motors work good, so I can't see why that's not easily possible. With cams and ported B-heads and the right intake manifold on a 4.6, you should be able to do that. We ran the FR500 intake manifold, and I think that may have been ported heads, like 3 Cobra heads or something like that, and cams in it, and it made like 485. It did it at a fairly high RPM, but it still did it. But if that engine was 100% efficient, it would make 2,300 horsepower. And as a side note, the exhaust would, I think, just be water. What's optimal for injector angle placement? How far away should the injector be from the valve? Close as possible. What's best for keeping the fuel atomized in the intake port? You're worrying way more than you should be. A carburetor doesn't have any of that, and it works just fine. Formula One, who actually aimed their injectors away from the valve on their ports, work just fine. Injectors that spray sideways and water meth injection also works like that. There is probably something to be said there, but what I'm saying is, even if you are off by a little bit, it's still going to work just fine. LS injector recommendation brand for 800 horsepower. I don't know about brands. You just need to size it so that it will make 800 horsepower. And for that, it's going to be a 50-pound injector would actually do that, but not under boost. So I would go to an 80-pound injector or a 100-pound injector for something like that. You keeping the Emirates, it's probably a good idea. When are you going to do Richard, when are you going to do a keeping a boat afloat with Flex Seal? That's real. That's a real deal. I think you could also I think guys have done it with duct tape, especially the Gorilla Tape. I like the Gorilla Tape. It works really well. Just dug my dad's late 80s 5-liter Lincoln SC out of the yard. That's right. Was the intake turned the other way on the Lincoln SC? CO2 and water. That's right, Jim. That's right. I thought that there was something else that I was missing there. Actually, now I think about it, keeping Airmax means I can run it higher and shoot for even more top end power, because you're going to keep all that low speed power, because you have essentially a modular motor quadrijet. Why are people arguing about JB Weld? I have 60-pound injectors on my 85 converted 2015 Chevy Cruze. Wonder if 120-pound injectors are part of my idle surge. What size is the motor? think the LSCs were oriented like a Mustang. I can't remember that stuff. And I didn't ever have a lot of experience with the LSCs. Again, that would be a Mark Sanchez question. Katie's, I'll let you know when I pop the hood. Okay, cool. Richard, I have an LS1 in my 2000. Ooh, a WS6 Trans Am. Does it have the like fancy hood on it and stuff? Fast 102, trick flow 215s. Would you use a 459 or 469 cam? Would be a great street combo on a 6-speed. It's a lot of camshaft for an LS1, first of all, so you're going to have to tune it for idle and all that stuff. It will make good power. And if you take a look, I've compared those cams directly back to back on the same motor, and they make exactly the same power curve through 90% of the curve. The 459 makes a little bit more on the bottom. And when I say a little bit more, I mean like 4 or 5 at the very bottom. And the 469 makes a little bit more on the top. And when I say at the very top, I mean at the very top past the power peak. And it's like 4 or 5. Otherwise, those two cams were identical. Like not one making more torque, not average power. They were identical. The curves overlaid. So you're not going to go wrong with either one of them. My guess is, and I don't remember doing this, that the 459 with less of a spread between intake and exhaust might have a little bit better idle. Just don't do the money shift. Instead of straight ports and runners, could they widen the power band shaped like tapered trumpets? Do you want to go way out? We're going to go way out, way out. So that's somebody needs to let me know. That's a movie or TV show reference. What was that from? 74% saying yes. Should I have tested the static injection? And 26%. How do people say no to that? Richard, Ellis question on ring gap. Big mag motors, you did 30 minimum. What did you do the lower ring at? We did the same for both the first and second ring. 5.3 with a 68 millimeter turbo next turbo, 120-pound injectors. I think the last owner may have been thinking 85. It's good to have more injector. As long as you can tune it down, as long as it will idle, that's all good stuff. But if you, like, we put those 160-pound dual fuel Ford injectors on them, and they didn't want to idle very well on some of the stuff that we tried to run it on. High voltage with boost, he puts up with all our super arguments. Don't make me stop this car, kids. Cam motion 242 for any big displacement LS. Is that a statement? Is that a question? What is that? Because I know it's not a statement. Because if it is, it's not accurate. And I love Steve over there, but there's no universal cam for any big displacement LS. And if you had a big displacement LS, you wouldn't want a single pattern camshaft on it. Yes, taper runners do work. Yes, 7 degrees. This seems to be the ideal. And if I remember right, I'm thinking 7 to 8 degrees is also kind of an optimum slip angle. Just throwing it out there. It's so that the airflow doesn't become unattached. Is there a bad 268 degree cam? Would therefore 268 degrees total always be the right cam choice? Is it 268 advertised, I hope, for your 4.6 liter? Because you don't need 268 degrees at 50 with that 4.6 liter. Especially if you're gonna run boost on it. Good evening, coming back straight from the track. Awesome. So you're here. The way outs were from the Jetsons. Nope. Swing and a miss on the Jetsons. Yes, Bob from the Flintstones. That's right. Watch out for the way outs. Which itself was a takeoff from what Orson Welles movie? Because that's where it came from. Coming back straight from the track, beat a Pro-Charged Fox on slicks. Nice. Pretty sure he was on low boost. Stock long block. Lossy stacks do work. I had somebody make a comment on the video that I had posted saying that, and it was somebody that I thought was here on occasion or all the time, and I can't remember. but they made the comment that the stack length after the throttle body doesn't make a difference. It does. Richard, generally speaking, will that's almost like thoughts, but not quite. Will my stock fuel system support 670 horsepower on my 42-pound injectors? 42, you got to do the math on that. Are you using, is it an NA motor? Is it an NA motor? Is it supercharged? Is it running E85? 42 times 16. They will 42s, as long as you have the right fuel pressure, will support 670 NA horsepower, as long as your brake specific is like at 0.5 or better. So maybe take the belt off. That's right. 270 advertised. You should have no trouble making 100 horsepower per liter then, and you're going to have no trouble running that thing at 9 or 10,000 RPM where it's going to want to make power with that camshaft. Can you improve low end torque with long runners and still have good top end power? Yeah, with a centrifugal blower you can do that, or with the dual runner intake. Do you think it's worth? Is it worth going crazy on the fuel system, even though I only want 350 horsepower for my XR6? I've got 1,000cc injectors, TS FPR, and a Plasma Man Surge with a Holley VR2 fuel pump. For you have all that for 350 horsepower? My testing is going well. The 3800, that's good. What if the taper that you have makes the airflow go supersonic? Air runners don't matter. Yes, it always matters. Well, Admiral, if you have a 4-valve modular head that flows 275 CFM, which should be no problem at all, then you've got enough to make 550 NA horsepower. So you don't have to worry about getting more flow. You're there for the NA power that you want to make. I'm in a smallish port right at the valve, but steadily increasing cross section to a big 3 or 4 inches. I don't know. You'd have to try stuff like that. What you should do is look at what professional teams are doing. And if they're not doing that, it should give you a fairly good indication that that's not the way to go. I think the test would be worth revisiting to pick a cam for each manifold. You don't pick a cam for each manifold to test the manifold, because then you're not testing the manifold. You're testing a combination, which is not what we wanted to do. We wanted to show what the manifolds all do. If you were picking one manifold, then you might opt to have a different kind of camshaft in a manifold that wants to run at 6,500 or 7,000 RPM. But what I wanted to show was what manifolds do, and you have to decide on one sort of camshaft to do all of that. Which is why when I talked about earlier today how cool the test was, that even with this, that it still did exactly what it was supposed to do, because that's what runners do. When I had my Le Mans, I thought Pontiac would have been easy to make a custom intake for. Did you have the 6-cylinder, or the 4-cylinder version? What's your take on new F1 turbo plenums with the runners built in? What do you mean by runners built in? That the stack goes up inside the plenum? Because if that's the question, that people have been doing that for years. But if F1 is doing it, you can assume that it's pretty effective. To accelerate airflow to supersonic velocity, you need a pressure drop of 60%. That's good, Casey. I like that. Although I'm not anymore, my family, when I was young, had season tickets to the Raiders back when they were in Oakland. And this is when Ken Stabler was playing and Fred Blitnikoff, Cliff Branch. This was back in that era. And so I got to go to a lot of games, which was really fun. I haven't been to a football game in a really long time, and I don't really watch it much on TV. I do tend to watch the Super Bowl or occasionally playoff games. Honestly, a lot of times I don't know who's playing, but I'm watching it for the snacks and for the commercials. The reason I think the Pontiac V8 is easy to make an intake for is that the water is easily detached. Yeah, you could just have the water cross over in the front, right? Does plenum volume affect runner flow to fill piston? No, that's not the way that it works. I've had that conversation with a lot of people. Oddly enough, they think that the plenum is an air reservoir, so that the air, so that the cylinder, while they're filling, never runs out of air. Like it's got all this extra stuff. But then you do the math on what the airflow is, and then what the plenum size. If you do the volume size of that, and you go, okay, it has this much air and that much volume, and then you figure out that it's less than a second that it's all being drained. It's being drained many, many times, obviously very, very quickly. So the thing is that that's not an air reservoir for anything. Why did GM go from one extreme to the other, from the tune port to the LT1? Now they compromise with an LS. I don't know. I don't know how. It would be cool to sit in on, because I think that the way that it works with OEMs is different design teams pitch different things, and then they make a case for why they should do that, and the design teams each go back and forth. I guess that's the way that I envision it. That may be just total nonsense, but that I envisioned that the modular Ford people somehow took over and had a coup at Ford, which they shouldn't have won, or at least one person on the modular Ford design team should have said, you know what, we should make this bigger. We should have bigger bore spacing so that we don't run out of displacement. Let's make this at least so that we can make this 6 liters or more. You really just need intake flanges, runners, and plenums. Yeah, if you were here the other night when I was showing the intake manifold for the one from Speedmaster, which would be similar to other people's stuff, it is fairly simple. Richard, did you see that video with my dad's barn find 64 389 Catalina? I didn't. I'm gonna have to check that out. That's kind of a cool car. Is it a tri-power 389? Is it a 4-barrel? Which one is it? Richard, I found some cheap early 70s LTDs on Craigslist. So we want the floaty feel there. Richard, I'm Japanese, and in Japan, they call the intake plenum surge tank. Okay, cool. Will a 459 cam fit a stock bottom end LS1? Yes. Also have Harlan Sharp roller rockers, trick flow 215 heads. Will I need extra spring pressure for those? I don't know what spring you had on the 215 head, because that head was available with different spring combinations. You need to look at that. And also, I wouldn't put roller rockers on it. I would put stock rockers on it. Have 2 turbo TPI setups, both running Mega Squirts. Yeah, but you have the cool, like, bare intercoolers from the Callaway that makes them look so good. Yeah, I have both of those. Building a TPI for my Camaro for retro performance. Just wondering if anyone has experimented with using the 0411 GM stuff. I think people have here, and I know that it works. It's not necessary for a tune port deal, though. Have you ever tested the GM Performance Parts ramjet induction system? No, I haven't. The one that looks kind of like the old school Rochester fuel injection. I don't think I've run that. The guys at Westech had to have run at least one of those at some point. Good joke, Dan. Big block barge are the best barges. Loose weather is upon us. For turbo application with water to the air intercooler built into the intake manifold, does the plenum volume matter? In my opinion, the plenum volume matters very little regardless of what you're doing. Just as long as the intercooler fins aren't directly above the runner inlet. And even if they are, that doesn't really matter, as long as they're not restricting it in any way. If you look at the plenums in most of these factory supercharged cars, there's not a lot of plenum volume there. And they're not looking to make a lot of plenum volume, because it really, honestly, it's not terribly important. Do longer velocity stacks on Weber carbs change the runner length? Yes, absolutely they do. The intake manifold before the carburetor does, and the stack after the carburetor does, or vice versa, depending on how you're looking at that. Richard, I've never heard anything bad about roller rockers. They're unnecessary on an LS, and they create valve float on an LS. And the factory rockers are going to 8,500 RPM. So on LS applications, they're just not really necessary. Sometimes not a bad idea depending on what valve guide you're using. But given the fact that the people are making, 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower with stock rockers, they're just not, it's not a requirement. The factory rockers are pretty good, as opposed to stamped steel rockers that they would have used on the previous generation small block. Just a warning, if you piece together a TPI setup, be incredibly careful about the IAC passage in the plenum and the throttle bodies if you mix and match them. That's true. They're different. The 400M was a very popular motor in the LTDs. That's a motor that I think just doesn't get the love that it should. That's why I wanted to build one. Second, third rings control oil. Third rings returns it to the pan. Second ring keeps it out of the chamber. I don't have a timing for the Big Bang 3800. I don't have timing for anything really. On the Ramjet 350, it made 351 horsepower and 403 foot-pounds of torque. It seems like a lot of torque relative. Oh, it has a really small camshaft in it. The long block that they use is a Vortex. So do they use a is that intake manifold designed with the Vortec head bolt pattern? Form followed function on the Chrysler T1 log intake. You're talking about the intake manifold on it? That's a terrible intake manifold. And we'll demonstrate exactly what it does. At least I suspect that it is. It's short and worked and did all the stuff that it was supposed to do. It's just that there's a reason that they went with the longer runner intake manifolds when they did, because they're definitely going to make more power. At what point do you lose inertial ram and reflected wave? Bends don't change that. A mismatched gasket also doesn't change that. The reflected wave still goes in unless you. The one thing that might do that is these. Have you seen the screened gaskets that are, I guess, designed to keep stuff that people would drop down the intake port out? Those might do that. Richard, does a larger centrifugal blower have any response rate change compared to a small one? Yes, it does. Yeah, Michael, they want me to not test stuff. What's going on? Going to use it to replace the TPI in my 92 Firebird. That sounds like a good combination. Do shared intake runners not count toward runner length? They do, but when they Siamese them, the Siamese point now becomes the runner length. On the turkey pan style manifold of Cobras and Lightnings, you're looking at the intake manifolds for the 03 Cobra stuff and the supercharged Lightnings. Those have really, really short runners. The runner length that's in those will never come into play in the RPM range that you're running. Chilton listed a 400 with a 4-barrel carburetor. I've never run across one of those. I don't remember ever getting a comment from somebody that had one, not a factory one. Colleen, you're making rounds again. He needs 83 more. I thought we would have already taken care of all of that. He drove 650 miles. Okay, everybody go to Mopars, Mustangs, and minivans and subscribe. All you have to do is click on the button. It's very easy. So go there and help Colleen out so that, is this your son? That he just drove 650 miles to race in the No Name Nationals, and he needs the subscription. So go do that. Come on, make it happen. Help this guy out. He's a racer. He just did a 650 mile road trip. You got to do it just for that. Early Ford 400s in cars came with 4 barrels, but in trucks they were all 2 barrels. Okay. Ben had one. See, look at that. 3-foot intake runner is best. It is. Like, I want to build one of those. I think 20 inches or so would be the longest one that I've done. And it's just 20 inches of intake manifold, not with the port though, not with the head port. Did you see the dumps test on the Engine Masters they just released? What were they testing? What test was it? I mean, these all come out way after the testing. I just don't know where they are. I saw that Freiburger got bit by a black widow, but it didn't envenomate him. They can choose to do that, just like rattlesnakes. I would think that they usually would save that for prey because venom is, I mean, they have to produce it, so they don't have an unlimited source. Oh, 400 with 4V heads, that never came from the factory. They were all 2V heads. Yeah, Ben, they do. I get that comment all the time. I should be heading down to West Tech for too long here. The sonoramic, yes. They tested exhaust dumps and their effect on power. Okay. Have you ever run a car at El Mirage? Yes, I have. What's the best cam to run on the street? There's lots and lots of good cams that you could run. Sister got hit by a black widow, the arm double inside. Well, there's definitely venom there. I had a coworker got bit by a black widow and he pulled off a brake drum. We warned the guy. First saw, he said, "It's just a spider." It's the pretty one with the little hourglass. They're really nice. And it's the female ones that are bad. The Mirage still races. 74% saying yes, 26% saying no, that I should have tested the stack injection. Noonan. Or Noonan, either way. One would be Caddyshack. Oh, so here's something that I want you guys to do. I want you guys, and you guys could do this when you come back tomorrow or tomorrow morning or on the live feed tomorrow night. I want you to come up with some weird esoteric cars that they made very few of or one of, or something that you'd like to see like redone. What would be a cool like car to build? The Omni GLHS had a lot of Black Widows. The Bricklin. Ooh, a Lancia Stratos. Yeah, that would be good. Bradley GT, Ford Falcon, BA, Pontiac Aztec. Yeah, Aztec for life. Oh, the Shogun. Yeah, that's a good one. Rotary Vet, Lancia Delta. Yes, twin charge. Mitsubishi Starion. An R5 Turbo 2. Yes, that would be awesome. Olds Jetfire, Javelin SST. AMC Gremlin. Pacer. Yes. 4-wheel drive Pacer. Didn't they do a twin turbo V6 Corvette also? 1970s Dodge Colt twin stick. Subaru Brat. R5 turbo here in the States. The place where we used to go do work, a shop over in Huntington Beach, the guy had he had an R5 turbo too. It was very, very cool. ASC McLaren Capri, twin turbo 4.3 liter V6 Corvette. I know that they had one. I remember reading about it. Cyclone Typhoon. Yep, those are good. The Callaway, but yeah, not that one. This is before that. This would have been a 70s or early 80s twin turbo V6. They did twin turbo prototype Nova. Opel GT, sub 900. Yep. For station wagon, any kind of like big block 4-speed station wagon is definitely cool. How about the Dodge? What is it? The Wraith that they did the 2-liter or twin or 2.2 turbo deal for that. That was a movie car, right? Porsche 968 3-liter inline 4-cylinder, but they want to do but a 4-valve version of that. The turbine power Corvette, ball in motion 69 Camaro. How about a ZL2 Corvette, which they only did prototypes of? We know what the ZL1 is, but does anybody know what a ZL2 is? I do. Ball in motion stuff, that's good. 40 XP, I do like those. Pontiac Turbo Trans Am. Bill Gates 959. Porsche 917, yes. The long tail. Old Calais 442. They did make one, I know. I remember reading about it. It was a real car that they used for the movie. Consulier, my SCCA driving instructor had one. I remember I raced him in my Mustang in showroom stock. An SHO Taurus motor, those are cool. 777 project, 7-liter, 7,000 RPM, all motor, single over cam, 2-valve block. That's what gave us the Boss 6.2. The Pinto Volvo V8 444S, the Enos Cosmos 20B3 rotor. Oh, the Mercedes-Benz C112. I was looking up the Auto Union stuff today too. Oh, a Lotus Cortina. One of the guys that comes to West Tech has one of those, and he has a Lotus Cortina with a 302 in it. Yeah, Daniel, probably better not to stick your hand in an electrical junction box full of Black Widows. Yeah, the Shogun with the Show V6 and the Escort. Oh, no, that was in, yeah, that's right. 81 PPG pace car that was a twin turbo V6. Okay, see, I thought it was the 70s or 80s. Dodge Turbo M4S. Maybe that's the one I was thinking of. I want to see the Cadillac 468 run. It's going to be hard to find one of those that actually runs. Mazda 787D, yep. Alfa Romeo. The King Cobra, AMC Spirit. Ricardo Montalban with Corinthian leather. Turbo Sunbird. Alfa Romeo Milano, yes. Or a Alfa Romeo Callaway twin turbo deal. The GTV6 twin turbo Callaway version. 78 Honda 1200, yes, I like those. Or an S600. Vega, Citroen, CV2. Opel Kadett. I like the Opel GTs. Rotors usually have pretty long runners. Sierra Cosworth, I do like those. First gen Nissan pickups. I like the early Toyota pickups too. The Greenwood Turbo, yep. That was the Le Mans car, right? The Le Mans Sprint with an overhead cam, yep. Turbo Corvair, TR6. I almost bought a TR6 when I bought the 260Z that I had. Cosmic, so you've Spun a bearing in your rod. After I do that, I don't like reusing the rod. You can have it resized if it, even if it looks okay. Did it get a lot of temperature put in it? Rods are so cheap, I just would replace it. Ferrari California Special, yep. Yeah, an E-Type Jaguar, but it has to be a convertible though. An Escort RS, yes, a Cosworth Escort, that would be very, very cool. Next body GTO. A TBR with a Hypo 289, yep. Evil handling, but certainly fun, like a Cobra. How about a TR7 or a TR8, but a TR8 but with a real V8 in it. California Special Mustang. I think that was a body package, like a external thing. I don't think that they were, did they get any power changes with those? How much change in power would a tuning port lose if the common plenum was not there? How are you going to throttle it if we could run it and just take the lid off like we've done before and see? Then it becomes an IR manifold and the power is going to change, but the runner length is still going to stay the same. Ooh, a Ford RS200, yes. Any of the Group B cars would be definitely cool. Turbo X19. I think what would be cool in that would be the Quad 4. The TR8 did have a 215 in it, but I'd want to put a real motor in it. The Trabant. I think a turbo Trabant would just be cool, just all by itself. Bobby Allison called the Porsche a $12,000 imported Corvair. The IROCs, they raced Porsche, the first international race of champions. Might not have been, I think it was the first one. They raced Porsches. Going to an ITB or individual carb set, trying to stay about the same length to get the scientific test. That's good. All-wheel drive K-Series Rampage. That would be good. I really would like an all-wheel drive K-Series Omni. My mom actually had a Corvair when I was young, so I did get to ride around in it. Yeah, Dan, I bet those are. And I bet if you had Mark Donahue's, it would be it'd be really big bucks. 1 more minute. Cadillac Elante. So we're going to close out our poll at 73% saying yes, I should have put stack injection under, which it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Bryant, why would you be using 23-degree heads for a drag race build on a small block Chevy? Jacob, yes, we're unfamiliar with the Duntov rotary Corvette back in the day. They built some really crazy stuff. If you go back and look at some of the engines that they tried, IndyCar engines and stuff, it was pretty amazing what they were trying back in the day. You had your chance at Chrysler TC by Maserati. They had those at the car farm. And the car farm, Ben actually sent me a photo today. And this will be the last comment for tonight because I got to get going. Ben sent me a photo today of I think it's a 75, some sort of Dodge. But the cool thing is it had a V8. I'm thinking it was a 360. And since it's mid-70s, it's going to be an LA 360. But the cool thing is it had a tunnel ram on it. And I pointed out that it had an Excel supercoil on it and an old school MSD, the old box, the old style box. But the cool thing is it had a tunnel ram, but with a single 4-barrel. And I said, dude, everyone has been asking me to do a tunnel ram with a single 4-barrel instead of dual quads. And there it was, just staring. They loaded it, backed it out of the trailer that my truck had frequented, or at least was in there one time that we had to take all the air pressure out of the tires to get it to fit in this trailer. But he came back with a very cool thing. And I told him how cool it was to have a tunnel ram with a single 4-barrel that I definitely want to test. So I'll have to maybe try to see if I can finagle some kind of test out of it, because it was very, very cool. And on that note, it's time to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up as always. And somebody gave me some super chats money, and I think that I go right by it. I hope they didn't. I'm gonna scroll back. I thought that I saw that happened. If you did, thank you very much. I thought that I saw that appeared, and I'm going through here now. If you did and I missed your question, I apologize. Please make sure to point that out. Sometimes I get going through here and I'm scrolling, and I'm not seeing it. You don't see a super chat? I thought that it popped up. Maybe it was just me. Maybe just wishful thinking. But thank you guys all for showing up, and I will see you all tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. Boom.